Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, Mon-Chaio.
And a Happy New Year.
It's a pirate New Year.
Arr.
Arr. All right. So this is our last episode of 2024. It's 2024. I have to think of what year it is. Mon-Chaio, it's been a amazing year. We have done, I think this will be episode 51. I
agree.
Of a 52-week year, one episode a week. We've only missed one, and I think that's just the second week after this where we're just taking a break until the new year starts. I think that's what it is.
We should probably take more breaks.
Yeah.
And of course, we had some vacation casts mixed in, so it wasn't all completely 1 week every week, although somebody did have to record and edit something every week, right?
Yep. Something was going on every single week. And there were a few times, I think, where we were able to kind of pre-record, have things ready, and then I think we both got a couple weeks off through the year. I can't remember exactly when that was, but I feel like that happened this year.
Yeah, and we covered a lot. I mean, when you do 51 episodes, you cover quite a bit.
And each episode is almost an hour. It's almost 51 hours of content.
Yeah, of leadership content, a lot of which is very dense. I continue to hear this from people who listen to the podcast and say, I can't listen to it while I'm doing something else because
we're so enrapturing.
I don't know if that's it. I think what I hear is if they miss 15 or 20 seconds, it actually is material for their understanding of certain portions. And so they actually have to pay attention, which means that they then don't listen to it when they're working, for example.
Yeah. Okay, well, so let's try to make this one a little less dense and a little more airy.
Well, before we start on this one, Andy, I wanted to ask, I thought this might be fun. Do you have a favorite episode or a few of your favorite episodes from this year?
I have to plead the problem that I don't remember you reference our episodes much better than I do. I don't remember what we talk about. So I'm pulling up our podcast stuff on Spotify to figure out what it is we've talked about.
I think that's a reasonable way to go about it. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now as well. So yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. I have to admit, it's like the ideas are there in my head. I can access them. But if I think about when did we talk about what,
for sure.
Lose it.
For sure. I can't imagine that anyone would really be able to say, oh, well, here's 51 hours of content and I remember my favorite 3 minutes or whatever. That's kind of ridiculous.
The Peter Principle one. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The Wicked Problems, the Peter Principle, the wartime leader, kind of wartime and peacetime leader talk, out of the wartime crisis trap.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that one too.
Yeah. I think those three are the ones that kind of got me.
Yeah, for me, I think Method and Madness and Storytelling was a good one because it's kind of different than a lot of the types of episodes that we do. I feel like it's more applicable to not even just leadership, but every sort of facet of your life, I think, requires storytelling. And so I like that one. I'm looking at this. Our remote work series was earlier this year. I thought it was last year.
Oh, yeah,
but
it was this year.
I really, really liked the work we did on the remote work series just because it gave me, an excuse to really dive into remote work research and read about what was going on in that field, which I thought was pretty neat. I'm going to make a plug for The Power of Repeat.
The one that we had so much fun with.
Which was early in the year, February, beginning of February. We had so much fun with. I edited it, and I had a lot of fun in the editing, and nobody listened to it. So
yeah, that was a little disappointing when we started looking at the stats on it, and we're like, oh, okay.
So I'll just make a plug. Maybe some other people will listen to that one. And then I really like the 5-part scaling episode we did at the end of the year. So those are kind of my highlights, I think.
Yeah, I think those are all good ones. I don't know. I enjoy all of them. I enjoy just the opportunity to kind of read up on something, shoot the breeze about it, think about it, and see if it changes my mind about something.
Yeah.
I think for me, over the year, I've become a little less skeptical of remote work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's worked for me in the reading up on things and going like, okay, I think there's ways it could work. There's ways it makes sense.
Yeah, I think especially the research around hybrid work.
Yeah.
I think is really eye-opening. And of course, without rehashing, you have to do hybrid work right. And so many people do it wrong and then it doesn't work. But
yeah.
I agree.
So, Mon-Chaio, let's get on to the topic because I can smell what I have next to me and I want to talk about it.
And what does that odor smell like? Is it a code smell?
It is. It is actually a code smell that says I've done something right.
Okay.
Last year, we did the eggnog. This year, this came about because, Mon-Chaio, you mentioned that you had shiokoji. Mm-hmm. And so we started talking about fermentation and other things. So we decided, let's do something about fermentation for our end of year.
Yep.
And for our listeners who don't know, Mon-Chaio and I, we both do the tech leadership stuff. We do software engineering, but we also have done a lot of cooking. And so a common topic that we discuss outside of this podcast is cooking or things related to that. So last year it was the eggnog. We talked about eggnog, our recipes for eggnog, Mon-Chaio's 1 year eggnog. Have you tried your eggnog this year?
Mm-hmm. So Thanksgiving, so that was a couple weeks ago, was my first time that I tried my 1 year base age eggnog. Mm-hmm. And it was fantastic. Now, the question is, it is almost time for me to start my eggnog for next year, right? Because before I leave for the Christmas holidays, we'll need to finish off what's in the fridge. Because I make this batch and I used half of it for Thanksgiving. I used a quarter of it when we entertained last week, and I have a quarter left. So we'll have to use that up so that I'll have room to make next year's. Mm-hmm. But I am considering, call me crazy, that half of next year's batch is going to have the dairy added to it at the beginning as well.
Ooh. Now, we talked about that last time, and we thought that might be pushing it a bit far. So what's changed your mind?
Nothing, just experimentation.
Maybe I might suggest split it into 2 batches. So if something goes wrong, you still have something.
Right. So that was the idea, was I make a batch and then half of it would have dairy added to it.
Okay, yeah.
And I might even make that a quarter of it has dairy added to it just to test.
Right.
But that is the classical method, right? Is everything is added all at once at the beginning. And I would imagine maybe eggnog was a dairy preservation technique at one point. I don't know.
I've seen recently a few episodes of Max Miller's Tasting History. He was talking about eggnog recently. So maybe I haven't watched it, so maybe he'd talk about that. And I think there's another one, a guy who, what is it, Townsend and Sons. He's also recently talked about eggnog, and he does like 17th, 18th century recreation. So he might talk about that.
Food recreation or
all sorts of recreation?
Okay.
So he does food, he does cooking, but he also does ways in which the household is run, how to build a house, how to make certain things, all sorts of stuff. So getting on to the fermentation takes all sorts of routes. One time I spent about a year going through a book full of fermentation. So I've done tons of it. And Mon-Chaio, you mentioned that you had some shiokoji. That's what kicked this all off. So
right.
What is shiokoji? Let's talk about what is shiokoji.
Let's see if I'm going to be able to do this justice. So koji is a spore. It's a mold, I believe, called Aspergillus something or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And it has been cultured for, I think, a long, long time through human history as a beneficial spore. It's used to make things like miso in Japanese cuisine. And I don't know if Japanese cuisine is the only one primarily that uses this spore or whether it's prevalent throughout worldwide cuisine, but I've only heard about it through Japanese cuisine.
Yeah, I only heard about it through Japanese cuisine as well. And in fact, when I even learned a little bit about some Korean fermenting practices, you would think that like there would be interplay there. Korean fermentation, I think even for the Korean form of the rice wine, they use barley as the enzyme rather than koji. So
Barley as the
yeah,
enzyme.
yeah. So the thing that koji gives you is so it's this mold. It grows on rice. All cool, but whatever. The thing that you actually want out of it is the enzyme that breaks starches down into sugars. And it's pretty much the same enzyme that you get in barley and wheat that's used for beer making in the Western world. And so in Korean rice wine, they use malted barley with rice. And so then they get the enzyme from the malted barley. In sake, Japanese rice wine, you use koji rice, and you put koji rice in with other cooked rice, and then the koji rice has the enzyme and it starts breaking down all the starches.
Well, what I would be curious is what is the microorganism present on the malted barley?
It's no microorganism. The malted barley. So the way malting works is you first get the barley wet. That starts it germinating. Once it starts germinating, the plant produces the enzyme to break down the endosperm into sugars so that the little seedling can start growing. And that enzyme is the enzyme you want. So you germinate the barley and then you kiln it. So you stop it from growing and then you roast it to a particular level. For beer making. For making sake, you don't really care too much. You just want it to stop growing.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. And I ask because shio is this microorganism that's generally grown on rice, but it can also be inoculated into any number of things.
You can,
generally things that have starch, proteins, lipids, that sort of a thing is what it needs.
Yeah.
Western,
so you can do koji barley if you want, and koji wheat.
In fact, I was about to go there, which is my shiokoji is koji barley.
Oh, is it?
Not koji rice.
Oh.
No, yeah. I prefer, in some of my applications, the taste of shiokoji made from koji barley. And so it is shio inoculated onto barley. And then, so that's shio, and then shiokoji, that's koji. And then shiokoji is simply that mixed, shio means salt, right? So that's simply that mixed with a brine and allowed to wet ferment, which continues that process where the enzymes break down the sugars and the fats and the proteins, minuscule amounts, in order to produce flavor compounds. And then that resulting wet brine mix can be kept almost indefinitely, a year at least.
Yeah.
And then used as marinades in various applications of cooking. So that is what I have in my fridge right now. I've done a bunch of stuff with shiokoji. We did, weirdly, shiokoji Swedish meatballs this year for Thanksgiving.
Nice.
I've obviously done shiokoji steak. I have a custom burger blend that I shiokoji for a day, and then I grind, and then I freeze. Ooh. Yeah, so it's great. It's great. So I think that's what got us started on the conversation. But
and the idea behind shiokoji is not only is it's the salt, it's the enzyme, and so you get a different breakdown of the proteins in the meats when you add it to the meat, and just a little bit. You're not. I mean, you could do it for a much longer time, but you get a little bit of that breakdown as well as you have the sugars of the shiokoji itself, because since the enzyme is acting on the rice that's in there, you get a bit of sugar out of that. And so you get this nice sweet and salty and meaty combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So the protease will break down the protein in meat. It's great as a tenderizer. It doesn't change the texture, I found, that much, but it does feel, the mouth feel is a little bit different. And interestingly enough, it actually does act a little bit on the meat. Did you know that meat has starches in it?
Well, so protease is the enzyme for proteins. amylase is the enzyme that it produces for starch, and
That's right.
I believe it's koji produces both of those, which I think makes it a little different from what you get from malted barley.
Right. And
Malted
it
barley,
also
I think, is
has, in
just
addition to that, also has lipase, I think, for fats
oh
and lipids
I didn't know
as
that.
well.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I was reading up on this, and I thought, well, the meats that I have, when you marinate them in koji, they actually brown quite fast.
Oh,
So part of that certainly has to do with the sugars that have been created when the koji catalyzed the reaction against
yeah.
the starches in the rice, right? So the mixture itself has sugars in it. It turns out that there are starches in meat as well, small amounts of starches that then the koji, the amylase, will also catalyze into simple sugars, which I didn't
Oh.
know.
Yeah, I guess it
And
makes sense. I mean, it's the way the body, mostly the way the body stores energy in muscles.
exactly. And apparently there is this concept that's called muscle to meat conversion,
Muscle to meat
which I
conversion.
thought was fake when AI told me about it. I was like, this is something you made up. It's absolutely fake, but it's real. I read some papers on it, and yeah, there is this whole process of after an animal dies, you do the whole butchering and aging process.
Hmm.
And that's called the muscle to meat conversion. And there's also reactions that happen. So, for example, glycogen stores will get converted into lactic acid and glucose, and things
Oh,
happen, and that's called muscle to meat conversion. So, there is a difference, I guess, between muscle and meat.
all right. That is an interesting thought. Huh.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you had a second ferment, I think, as well. So we both got two. You've got your shiokoji,
Hmm.
and then you've also got a hot sauce.
Right. So, this started over a year ago, almost two, well, a year and a half ago now, where I'd just come back from Costa Rica, and it's always been on my mind that I didn't like any of the hot sauces that existed in the stores. I thought they all fell into two camps. One was semi-flavorful, but not spicy at all, essentially, to my palate.
Hmm.
And the other was burn your mouth off with chemicals
Yeah.
and no flavors.
Just spray some mace in your mouth.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I decided to make my own hot sauce, and as part of tinkering with this recipe, part of my hot sauce includes a set of fermented peppers. So that's also wet ferment.
Right. So
So you,
you do it in them in a brine.
hmm
Right.
and I think you've done that too with, I think kimchi or sauerkraut or something. I think is pretty
Yeah.
similar.
So sauerkraut isn't usually done that way, but kimchi I think is often at least started in a brine. So you'll put the cabbage for kimchi. You'll put the cabbage in a brine for a few days, and then you take that out and you mix it with the rest of the vegetables and the peppers and everything else you want it to go with. And so that basically, you can do this so many different ways. It's basically how do you get an environment for that bacteria that you want that produces lactic acid? How do you get an environment for it? And it just likes a salty environment. So you can do
Hmm.
it. You can get the salty environment by just taking your vegetables and adding salt, or you can get that salty environment by taking your vegetables and putting them in a brine. You could probably get that salty environment by taking your vegetables and covering them in shiokoji, and
Probably you could.
that might do something really interesting because there's so many starches to break down.
Well, and I've actually done shiokoji cucumbers.
Oh,
And they turned out okay. I wouldn't say they turned out great. Basically, shiokoji cucumber, mix it with your cucumbers for a day,
mm-hmm.
and then drain off the liquid and then keep it. They taste kind of meaty. I think the texture is a little bit mealy. But I can imagine you doing that with carrots.
Yeah, do it with carrots. Oh, this is a weird one. I wonder what it'd be like with potatoes.
Have to try it. I have to try it. That's an interesting one. I bet it would be good.
Maybe even do that and then slice them up and deep fry them. You slice it up, wash it just like you're making fries. Gets the extra starch off, and then deep fry that.
Or you could parboil to like 60%, cool shiokoji, and then roast. And then wash and roast.
Okay.
Not as much starch because you do wash away a little bit, but then, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, I'll have to look into this. We'll have to look into this.
And then at the end, dip it in your hot sauce.
Which is what I have here. Last year we drank eggnog, which obviously made the podcast get better and better as we went on that episode. But this year, we had to do something where we consumed what we made also on podcast. And so I mixed half shiokoji, half hot sauce here, and I have some saltine crackers. So we'll be trying that.
Just salt on top of salt on top of salt.
And flavor from the hot sauce. Well, and the shiokoji flavor. So that's what I have. But enough talking about my fermentation. I know shiokoji is what kicked us off, but that inspired you to return to your fermentation roots from years ago.
Yeah. So when we decided, let's do this, I was like, okay, well, I don't have anything fermented. Maybe I can get our listeners to think I could ferment something. It's dead simple. So one of the things I have is a thing that I made a while ago when I was on that whole fermentation, going through all the recipes kick. And it was just, I had a bunch of chilies. So what I did was I took just an equal amount of chilies and garlic. So it's a lot of garlic. This mix was 145 grams of chilies and 145 grams of garlic. And then just enough salt to make it taste salty. Which I think in this case it was something like 12 or 15 grams. And then you just mix it together and mix it together and mix it together. These are both of those ingredients don't have much water in them. So you don't end up with a lot of water coming out like you do with sauerkraut. And then I just let it ferment for 5 days. So it just sat on my countertop covered, bubbling away. And now it's just really garlicky and a little bit spicy. But very nice.
Nice.
Very strong.
In garlic or spiciness?
Both. I mean, not incredibly strong in spiciness. The spiciness goes down over time. When I first did it, I took a little bite and I was just like, that was hot. Now it's mainly that sharp bite of garlic. To the point where the first day I had some, so like 2 or 3 days ago, I had some. And then the next morning I woke up and my wife said to me, "You smell like garlic." So it is a lot, but you put it as a small condiment on things and it's really nice.
It sounds really tasty. Now, did you do a wet ferment or a solid or a dry ferment?
It's pretty dry. I didn't add any liquid. So
okay, so it sat on your counter, just covered, the materials were covered in salt. Then you covered the container with like plastic wrap or something.
Yeah. So it was just in a mason jar with a lid on it, loosely on it, because the fermentation will produce gases. If I put that on tightly, thing might explode.
Yeah, my hot sauce ferments have airlocks on them. There's special lids you can get for mason jars.
Yeah. I figured I was only going to let it go 5 to 7 days. And then I put it in the fridge to kind of slow down the whole process.
Right.
So I didn't bother with it. Usually you can get about 7 days before mold starts to show up. And then my second ferment, I was looking around and I was like, I want something more Christmassy. What would be the equivalent of a Christmas ferment? And I found online a recipe for something called Christmas Kraut. And basically it's a sauerkraut with a bunch of spices in it. And to make it even more Christmassy, rather than white cabbage, it's red cabbage.
Sure. Okay.
And so this one, if I smell it, it smells, actually it kind of smells like mulled wine. So
does it have mulled wine spices in it?
It does.
Cloves and
it has cloves and cinnamon and nutmeg and what else was in there? Ginger.
Mm-hmm.
And it has zest from clementines. Sorry. Zest from clementines. Oh, yeah. And some anise.
Okay.
As well. And so that is done just like a sauerkraut. So you slice up the cabbage thin, you add the spices, you add your salt, and then you just massage it until... Let me chew this. You just add your spices and massage it until the water starts coming out. And basically, you can let it sit and massage it and sit and massage it. It's kind of a loose process. And eventually, when you push down on it, enough water will come up to cover it. And that's kind of when you know you've done it enough. And then you pack it away in a container. You weigh it down so that the liquid stays above all of the vegetables. And then you cover it and you let it ferment for about a week. Kind of depends on how sour you want it. This actually didn't get very sour. Like a week for a sauerkraut would make usually a fairly sour sauerkraut.
Mm-hmm.
But this didn't get that sour, but it is very tasty.
I wonder if it's something to do with the red cabbage.
I think it is. I think the red cabbage, it didn't have as much water. Mm-hmm. Like I was massaging it and massaging it and massaging it. I was like, where is the water? It did eventually come out.
Mm-hmm.
But not nearly as much as white cabbage. A couple days ago, I had some, and I think I just had a section of it that wasn't well mixed, and it was overpoweringly clove. What I just ate, though, was actually really nice. I think it would go really well with a Christmas meal.
Well, there you go. I don't know that I personally would try. I'm not a big red cabbage fan, honestly. So, but the peppers and garlic one, I think I can get behind that. I'm going to try my hot sauce mixed with shiokoji. So I've obviously eaten a lot of shiokoji and a lot of hot sauce, but I've never combined them. And they're on this saltine cracker because for those people in the States, you'll know, U.S. kids only eat plain starches that are white for the longest time in their life for some reason.
Speaking of red cabbage, do you know the German tongue twister about red cabbage?
I do not.
So in German, red cabbage is called blue cabbage. It's called Blaukraut.
Okay.
And the tongue twister is, let's see if I can even say this. Blaukraut bleibt blau. Blaukraut bleibt Blaukraut. Brautkleid bleibt Brautkleid.
No.
It's red cabbage stays red cabbage. Wedding dress stays wedding dress.
So it is just a tongue twister. There's no meaning behind it?
I mean, it means that.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
It means exactly what it means in English. It's just really hard to say.
Indeed, it is really hard to say. I think the shiokoji with the hot sauce is, I don't know, my hot sauce is pretty spicy, so I don't know that I can really catch sort of the more nuanced notes in the shiokoji. It definitely adds a sweeter element to it, so it's less spicy than it is. But I bet I could tweak it to become something pretty neat. I'll just have to think about it a little bit. But I think there's something there. I think there's something, a shiokoji hot sauce.
Does it overly salt it or anything? Or is it not too bad?
No, not really. At least not in my tasting of it. Again, I'm having it on plain saltines, right? So
yeah.
But no, it doesn't appear to overly salt it.
All right. So that was our fermentation. Should we talk a little bit about what we're doing next year? Do we have any plans for next year yet?
I don't know. Do we?
I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen next year. I don't know what we're doing for the show. I don't know anything. My current contract will be ending early next year, and I'll be taking a bit of a break and then figure out what I'm going on to next.
Yeah, I mean, I think to allay listeners' fears, I don't think there is a world in which we don't do the podcast next year. Right?
Yeah.
I think we're pretty in this. I think that there is a lot to talk about still. Would we decrease the frequency? I don't know that we would. I think a week is probably right.
It is nice every week. We'll see what happens with our lives. I'll leave it flexible with that. See how things go.
Yeah, and maybe we can start to introduce new things where every other week we'll do something like what we've been doing, and then maybe we'll have guests on the other weeks, or we'll do a short form video, or I don't know. We can play around with it, or we'll do more stuff around fermentation. Who knows?
We'll just start talking more about fermentation and bread baking and sous vide and woodworking and watercolor painting and cycling
and smoking and IoT, home automation. Is there so TTL, could that be made to be a food podcast? Tasty time to taste liver.
Ooh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, so we'll be figuring out what exactly we're doing next year. We will be continuing, very likely similar to what we're doing right now. I can't imagine anything changing. We might change the intro music, though. I'm wondering if is that a thing that we do every year, every new season, a new intro music.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a little bit stale in my mind, and I didn't enunciate things. So there are some words which could be better in the intro. So I don't know. Yeah, we could. Do you have an idea?
No, I'd have to work through it, try out a few ideas.
The question is, are you going to have Christmas themed intro music for this episode?
Oh, certainly. Yes.
Of course. Okay. I've seen some things on social media recently where they mix up two songs. Normally it's like a Christmas song and a gangster rap album.
What?
Yeah, so they'll take a song like The Weather Outside is Frightful, and they'll somehow take a rap album and splice it in so it sounds like the person singing the Christmas song is singing the rap album. And the timing is right, so they'll elongate words and shorten words so they'll fit into the right stanzas and stuff. Pretty amazing stuff. You could do that with our intro. I'm sure you have tons of time, so you could totally do that with our intro.
Yeah.
Taking validated research. Yeah, something like that.
All right. With that, let's wrap this up.
Sounds good.
So it has been a good year. Looking forward to next year, Mon-Chaio.
Mm-hmm.
I could do our pitch for if anyone is interested in this fermentation stuff. We're happy to come to your company and talk to you about it, or anything else that we talk about on this podcast, tech leadership and all of that odd things. But no, fermentation is what you can hire us for. Just email hosts@thettlpodcast.com, hosts with an S on the end @thettlpodcast.com. And until next time, Mon-Chaio, be kind and stay curious.